Rome stood invincible in 180 AD, controlling 3 continents and commanding the known world's wealth. Their currency dominated global trade, their legions were unstoppable, their citizens believed the empire would last forever. Within 300 years, Rome was a memory. The pattern that destroyed Rome has repeated across history with mathematical precision. Spain learned it the hard way in the 1600s. Britain discovered it in the 1900s. The Soviet Union collapsed under its weight in 1991. Each empire followed identical steps toward destruction, and each believed they were different until the very end. Today, that same pattern is unfolding again. The signs are unmistakable, the sequence inevitable, and the timing closer than anyone wants to admit. Walk through the Forum Romanum today, and you'll see broken columns where senators once debated the fate of nations. The marble streets that echoed with the footsteps of emperors now host tourists taking selfies. What was once the center of the civilized world became ruins, overgrown with weeds. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took centuries, but it followed a predictable sequence that historians have mapped with disturbing accuracy. The collapse pattern operates like clockwork across civilizations. It begins with prosperity, legitimate wealth built through innovation, conquest, or resource control. This success breeds confidence, then arrogance, then fatal overreach. But here's the terrifying truth. The pattern isn't just historical curiosity. It's happening right now, in real time, with the same methodical precision that destroyed every previous superpower. Stage 1. Military overextension. The empire expands beyond its ability to maintain control. Resources stretch thin across too many fronts, too many commitments, too many promises. Rome discovered this when barbarian tribes began testing their borders. By 250 AD, Roman legions were stationed from Scotland to Syria, from Morocco to Romania. The empire became a giant police force trying to guard an ungovernable perimeter. Every mile of frontier required soldiers, supplies, and silver. The mathematics were brutal. Each new province cost more to defend than it generated in tribute. Spanish fleets couldn't defend 4 continents simultaneously. King Philip II maintained armies in Italy, the Netherlands, the Philippines, and South America, while fighting the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. By 1580, Spain had military commitments spanning 12,000 miles of coastline. The silver from the Americas, all of it, went to pay soldiers who were always outnumbered, always underfunded, always losing ground. Britain's navy couldn't protect an empire spanning 6 time zones. During World War I, British forces fought in France, Gallipoli, Mesopotamia, East Africa, and Palestine simultaneously. The Royal Navy patrolled every ocean, while German submarines picked off merchant ships one by one. The empire that ruled a quarter of the earth couldn't defend a quarter of the earth. The Soviet Union bankrupted itself trying to match American military reach with half the economic base. By 1985, the USSR maintained troops in Afghanistan, advisors in Angola, bases in Cuba, and missiles in Eastern Europe. They spent 20% of GDP on military hardware, while their citizens stood in breadlines. Each empire told itself the same lie: more territory equals more security. The mathematics prove otherwise. Military costs compound exponentially, while economic returns diminish. Eventually, the empire becomes too expensive to defend. But empires never recognize overextension until collapse begins. They see retreat as weakness rather than wisdom. Stage 2. Currency debasement. When military costs exceed revenue, governments face an impossible choice: raise taxes and trigger rebellion, or debase the currency and buy time. Rome chose debasement. Emperor Nero reduced the silver content of the denarius from 98% to 83%. His successors kept cutting. By 250 AD, the denarius contained barely 5% silver. Roman soldiers were paid in worthless coins, while bread prices exploded. The currency that once commanded respect across 3 continents became a joke in Roman markets. Spain mixed copper into their silver reales until they became worthless. The flood of New World silver had already created massive inflation across Europe. Spain simply made it worse. Spanish merchants began weighing coins instead of counting them. Foreign traders demanded payment in gold or refused Spanish currency entirely. The empire that controlled the world's silver supply couldn't maintain the value of its own money. Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931 after defending the pound for 7 years. The Bank of England had promised that every pound could be exchanged for gold at a fixed rate. When that promise became impossible to keep, sterling lost 25% of its value overnight. The currency that had anchored global trade for 200 years suddenly needed protection from its own government. The Soviet Union printed rubles that their own citizens rejected. Russian stores operated dual pricing systems, official ruble prices that meant nothing, and black market prices in dollars or goods. Soviet diplomats carried suitcases full of Western currency because rubles couldn't buy anything abroad. A nuclear superpower's money was worthless beyond its borders. Currency debasement feels like magic at first. More money appears without raising taxes. Government debt becomes manageable. Economic activity seems to flourish. Then reality hits. Prices explode. Trust evaporates. Trading partners seek alternatives. The currency that once commanded global respect becomes a cautionary tale. This stage is where empires reveal their true character. Do they accept reality and reform, or do they double down and accelerate toward destruction? History shows they always choose acceleration. Stage 3. Debt spiral. With a debased currency buying less and military costs climbing higher, empires enter a borrowing frenzy. They mortgage their future to maintain their present lifestyle. Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times in 40 years, but kept borrowing. Philip II defaulted in 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596. Each time, Italian and German bankers accepted restructured terms and lent more money. Why? Because Spanish military power kept their trade routes open. Each default was followed by new loans at higher interest rates. By 1600, Spain owed more than 10 years' worth of colonial silver revenue. Britain emerged from 2 world wars owing more than their entire economy could produce. World War I cost £35 billion, triple Britain's pre-war GDP. They borrowed from America, Dominions, and anyone else who would lend. When World War II ended, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than their annual economic output. The victory was achieved, but the empire was bankrupt. The Soviet Union borrowed so heavily from Western banks that their intelligence services spent decades trying to hide the debt. By 1985, the USSR owed over $100 billion to European and American lenders. Soviet economists knew the system was unsustainable, but couldn't admit it publicly. Instead, they borrowed more to service existing debt while planning economic reforms that never came. The debt spiral creates a feedback loop. Higher debt requires higher interest payments. Higher interest payments require more borrowing. More borrowing destroys confidence in the currency. Currency weakness makes existing debt harder to service. Mathematics governs this stage. When debt service exceeds 30% of revenue, the empire enters terminal decline. When it hits 50%, collapse accelerates. When it reaches 70%, the end comes quickly. Every empire hits these thresholds. None survive them. Stage 4. Economic hollowing. With military spending consuming resources and debt payments draining wealth, productive capacity withers. The empire stops making things and starts importing everything. Spain stopped producing goods and imported them with New World silver. Spanish shipyards closed, while Dutch and English yards built better vessels cheaper. Spanish farms produced less food, while Baltic grain fed Spanish cities. Spanish workshops made fewer goods, while Asian and European craftsmen supplied Spanish markets. The silver flowed in from America and immediately flowed back out to buy necessities from competitors. Britain became a financial center, while manufacturing moved elsewhere. British factories couldn't compete with American mass production and German efficiency. Instead of making goods, Britain financed the trade in goods made elsewhere. The workshop of the world became the banker of the world, until the bank ran out of money. The Soviet Union couldn't feed its own population, despite controlling vast agricultural land. Collective farming was so inefficient that the USSR imported grain from capitalist countries it supposedly planned to bury. Soviet factories produced goods so poor that even Soviet citizens preferred Western products. The command economy commanded nothing except shortages. Economic hollowing creates devastating vulnerability. When the empire can no longer pay for imports, essential goods disappear. Food becomes scarce, energy runs short. Society begins fragmenting as living standards collapse. This stage reveals the empire's fundamental weakness. It consumes more than it produces and has forgotten how to create wealth. Stage 5. Social decay. As economic conditions deteriorate, social cohesion disintegrates. Crime rises. Institutions lose legitimacy. The best minds emigrate. Political conflict intensifies. Rome's final centuries featured constant civil wars and barbarian invasions. Between 235 and 284 AD, 50 emperors claimed power, and most died violently. Roman citizens stopped volunteering for military service. Roman elites moved their wealth to Constantinople. Roman values became Roman jokes. Spain descended into regional rebellions and cultural stagnation. Catalonia revolted in 1640. Portugal broke away in 1640. The Netherlands achieved independence after 80 years of war. Spanish intellectuals fled to France and Italy. Spanish culture, which had dominated European art and literature, became provincial and backward. Britain's class system crumbled under economic pressure. World War I killed the sons of aristocratic families by the thousands. The general strike of 1926 paralyzed the economy. British emigration to America, Canada, and Australia accelerated. The social fabric that had held the empire together unraveled as economic realities intruded. The Soviet Union fragmented along ethnic and nationalist lines. Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians, Armenians, and others rediscovered identities that communism had supposedly eliminated. Alcoholism reached epidemic levels. Corruption became systematic. Party membership became a tool for personal advancement rather than ideological commitment. Social decay accelerates when citizens lose faith in the system's ability to provide security and opportunity. The empire's founding myths become hollow promises. Its symbols inspire ridicule rather than respect. This is the point of no return. Military power cannot restore economic health. Currency manipulation cannot restore social trust. Debt cannot solve a debt crisis. The empire has reached the cliff's edge. Stage 6. Imperial retreat. Faced with unsustainable costs, the empire abandons peripheral territories and commitments. What once seemed permanent proves temporary. Rome withdrew from Britain, Gaul, and Africa as barbarian pressure mounted and resources dwindled. Hadrian's Wall, built to last forever, was abandoned in 383 AD. Roman legions marched away from lands they had governed for 400 years. Local populations were left to fend for themselves as the empire contracted to defend its core. Spain lost the Netherlands, Portugal, and most of South America within 50 years. Each loss accelerated the next. Fewer territories meant less revenue. Less revenue meant weaker military. Weaker military meant more territorial losses. By 1700, Spanish power was confined to Iberia and scattered colonial outposts. Britain decolonized everything from India to Africa in 20 years. The empire that had taken 200 years to build disappeared between 1947 and 1967. India, Pakistan, Burma, Ceylon, Malaya, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda. Dozens of territories achieved independence as Britain lacked the strength to resist nationalist movements. The Soviet Union released Eastern Europe and collapsed into 15 separate nations. The Warsaw Pact dissolved without a shot fired. The Iron Curtain rusted away. The empire that had terrified the West for 40 years imploded in 18 months. Imperial retreat accelerates as former subjects sense weakness. Allies seek new protectors. Enemies press advantages. The empire's sphere of influence contracts rapidly. This contraction creates a death spiral. Smaller territory means less revenue. Less revenue means weaker military. Weaker military invites further challenges. Each retreat makes the next one more likely. Stage 7. Complete collapse. The empire's political structure disintegrates. Its currency becomes worthless. Its military dissolves. Its territory fragments into competing successor states. This final stage often happens with shocking speed. The Western Roman Empire fell in decades. The Soviet Union disappeared in months. Empires that seemed eternal prove ephemeral when their foundations crumble. The collapse pattern has operated for millennia because human nature remains constant. Success breeds overconfidence. Overconfidence enables overextension. Overextension requires shortcuts. Shortcuts create vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities compound until they become fatal. But here's what should terrify any observer of current events. The pattern is unfolding again, in real time, with frightening familiarity. The pattern unfolds again. Today's empire displays every symptom that preceded every previous collapse. Military commitments spanning 750 bases in 80 countries. Currency created from nothing, backing a $36 trillion debt. Manufacturing capacity shipped to Asia, while imports exceed exports by $800 billion annually. Social institutions under attack, while political dysfunction paralyzes governance. The sequence is identical. The timing is accelerating. The mathematics are unforgiving. America maintains troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, and dozens of other countries, while promising to defend Taiwan, Ukraine, Israel, and NATO. The overextension is complete. The bills are coming due. The pattern suggests what happens next. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, it's rhyming with Rome's final days, Spain's golden age delusions, Britain's imperial twilight, and the Soviet Union's sudden demise. The question isn't whether collapse will occur, but when, and whether anyone will recognize the warning signs in time to prepare for what follows. Some patterns are broken. This one never has been.